so much for taking time out of your evening to be here. We are so thankful to have you here today. My name is Erin Pribble. I proudly represent the Wells County Chamber of Commerce, and today I stand before you to address a matter of utmost importance, one that is affecting us globally, nationally, and in our small community. Several months ago, our community had the privilege of sitting down with Congressman Jim Banks, who initiated a conversation about the worldwide drug problem and how it impacts our own nation. We delved a little bit deeper into the issue, dissecting it really locally here of how it's impacting Wells County. It became very evident that the challenges that we face are no different than are being faced everywhere else in the communities around the world. Drugs in all forms and in all manifestations are here among us, affecting the lives of our loved ones. During that crucial meeting, many of us were profoundly moved and driven by a shared sense of responsibility. We felt compelled to come together, to unite our efforts, and to collaborate with organizations devoted to drug education, awareness, resources, and treatments. We recognize the need to pool our collective wisdom and the resources, such as the resources that you see around this room today and many others, and drawing from other sectors within the community being impacted by this. After a powerful kickoff session, something incredible happened. People in our community were not just willing and eager to make a difference. They looked around and declared, "I'm in. I want to help. I want to make a difference." So in that very moment, our Wells County Drug Task Force I'm In committee was formed. And that brings us to why we're gathered here today. This meeting is not just another event, it's a significant step towards creating a brighter future for our community. It's a symbol of our commitment to tackle the drug problem head on and to stand together its devastating effects and to provide hope and support to those who need it most. Thank you to each and every one of you for being here today, for being a part of this critical initiative. Your presence today signifies your dedication to making a real and lasting difference in someone's life. Together, we will work tirelessly where the harmful impact in drugs becomes a thing of the past. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here this evening. Next, I'd like to invite Chandler Gerber, Bluffton City Council member, to the stage to introduce our fabulous and wonderful speakers for this evening. Please give them a round of applause.
Good evening. I am Bluffton City Councilman Chandler Gerber, and on behalf of those who had a hand in making tonight's event possible, please allow me to say thank you. This is truly incredible to have over 130, 140, 150 people here. This is amazing. I had the opportunity yesterday to hear our featured speakers at Norwell High School, and I had the opportunity again this morning at Bluffton High School. And let me tell you all, we are in for a powerful evening. These guys truly are top-notch. Drug abuse and various forms of addiction have ravaged communities coast to coast over the previous years. And this evening, Bluffton and Wells County as a whole are saying that enough is enough. We've made a conscious decision to go on offense. We've decided that playing defense is no longer going to work. Across this nation, communities have been on defense as drug use has surged. Tonight, we change that here in Wells County. Going forward, we must attack this problem with the intensity and urgency that it requires. Virtually everyone in this room knows someone who's been touched by addiction in one way or another. Most of us know someone who passed away too young. Most of us know someone who is struggling right now. And maybe we have struggled with addiction in the past, or we are right now struggling ourselves. Some topics are very divisive. Some topics are very political. The topic tonight is addiction. And it's not divisive or political. It's unifying. Tonight we say, not one more. Not one more shattered life. Not one more lost job. not one more broken relationship, not one more overdose. Let's unite against a common enemy of addiction. Let's support one another and love one another through the hard times so we can emerge stronger as we head into the future. And again, thank you for being here this evening. Before the keynote speakers, I do want to thank a few sponsors. Thank you to the Wells County Foundation, National Oil and Gas, the town of Ossian, the town of Pinedo, the Wells County Commissioners, Renovate Counseling, and the Bluffton City Council. Without further ado, let me introduce our speakers. I'm going to read this straight off their information so I don't mess it up. Cody Knuckles is a three-sport athlete in high school who became addicted to opioids after a sports-related injury his senior year. Cody went from being a promising student athlete, coaching wrestling and football, to serving several prison sentences for his addiction and life choices. After 11 years of traumatic experiences while incarcerated, he had had enough. Cody's eyes were finally open to the hardships his choices had brought, not only for himself, but on his loved ones in the community as well. John Humphreys struggled with addiction for 17 years, starting in his teens with alcohol, which led to other drugs. Sober since April 24, 2012, John mentors and supports all ages in recovery. He has shared his message of awareness, hope, and the dangers of drugs with schools, colleges, city councils, jails, prisons, recovery groups, and community leaders through forums, keynotes, panel discussions, and interviews. Ladies and gentlemen, John Humphreys and Cody Knuckles.
I want to thank you guys first and foremost for coming out tonight, taking the time out of your evening to come hear us and to gather for the purpose that we're here for tonight. Before I get started, if you guys don't mind, I'd like to open in prayer. So if we could bow our heads, please. Dear Heavenly Father, I just want to thank you. I want to thank you for giving me a voice. And I want to thank you for everyone that is here tonight, Father, for we are gathered for one cause and one reason, Father, and that is to bring you glory and to shine awareness on addiction and how it is affecting and ravaging this country and our communities and our homes. Father, I pray that tonight that my words be not my words, but my words be your words, Father. And I pray that you speak through me and that everything that is said here tonight is pleasing to you. Father, I ask you these things in your amazing name we pray. Amen. Wells County, I don't even know what to say. If you're a parent here tonight of somebody in this community, a student in this community, give yourself a round of applause. Your kids were absolutely amazing. It was an honor to be here. I grew up in a small town about 45 minutes from here in Gas City, Indiana. And I grew up in a single parent home. By the time that I hit middle school, I really started to understand that some of the issues I was dealing with, I struggled with feeling I was worthless. I didn't ever feel like I belonged. I always wanted to try to fit in. I was a class clown. Everywhere I went, I tried to make people laugh. I needed to be accepted. I didn't understand at the time, but I know now that not having a dad in my life, there full time, it affected me in ways that I never knew or never thought could. I have some family here tonight, and my grandmother was always big in her faith, and she's always went to church, and I strayed away from it for so long as a kid. And in 6th and 7th grade, I started to dabble in alcohol, and I started to smoke weed. By the time I got to high school, I grew a ton. I grew about 6 inches between 8th grade and freshman year. So I started to get recognition, and I started to get noticed for reasons other than me trying to be a class clown or trying to fit in. I tried to dive all into athletics. I tried to focus all my negative energy and my pent-up anger and my built-up aggression into football and wrestling. Sophomore, junior year comes around. My senior year rolls around. My senior year, I had a very, very good season in football and wrestling. But after wrestling, I ended up having a surgery. I broke my foot. And for the first time in my life, I was prescribed an opioid from my doctors for the pain that I was in. And I was prescribed a bottle of Vicodin. I was drinking and I was smoking, and those were on me. But I had an addictive personality, and I had no idea what that was at 15, 16 years old. But even to this day, if I enjoy something and I'm passionate about something, whether it be work or video games or speaking, whatever it is, I give it my all at all times, and I'm 100% all in on that subject. So when I first experienced these pain pills, and I would take one as prescribed, and my pain would go away, I thought this was an amazing thing. It was a great feeling. But when I started to take more and more and more, I was prescribed a refill. I was prescribed 60 of them with one refill. And after the first bottle was gone, I wasn't in much pain anymore, but I liked the feeling, so I had the second bottle refilled. And after that second bottle, it put me on a trajectory of the next 13 years of my life that was going to be a living hell. And at 17 years old, I had no idea what the future was going to hold. And I had no idea that I was going to, in a few short years, make some decisions that was not only going to change my life, if I knew now that some of those decisions I made was not only going to affect me, but it was going to absolutely tear my family apart. And my mom and my grandmother and my aunts were going to have to go through this thing of addiction with me. And I think when we're in addiction, we selfishly think it's all about us, and we're always worried about how we're going to get high and what the next thing we're going to do is. And in addiction, we don't stop and think about how much it's affecting our family and our loved ones and anyone in our lives. Because for me, I was a liar, I was a cheater, I was a stealer. There was times where I'd come in and I'd try to take the couch if you walked out of the room. And this whole time that I'm battling this thing that I think is just with me, my family is just devastated right along with me. And the cool thing about living in a small town, after I graduated high school, I got offered a job at the middle school for wrestling. I had an opening at the 7th and 8th grade at RJ Baskett Middle School. And even though I was almost a solid year into my opioid addiction, and I was drinking and I was still smoking weed every day, and I knew in my heart of hearts that it probably wasn't a good idea, but the part of me that always wanted to feel accepted and always wanted to fit in and wanted people to like me said, what a great opportunity. I can go coach. I can go be involved. I can be in the spotlight and people will think highly of me. And in 2005, I started at the middle school. And in 2006, a spot opened up at the high school. Our high school coach, our long-term coach, had moved to Adams Central High School, really close to here. And that left an opening, and they asked me if I'd like to come on and be the assistant coach at the high school. And of course, I was like, sure, that'd be great. And you see, the thing about addiction is, when we're in addiction, especially for myself, I would put a mask on and I would act like everything's okay, and I would think nobody could see that I was struggling. And on the outside, I would try to be smiley and act like I had everything under control, and on the inside, I was physically dying. I like that. I get it. I feel the same way. And in 2007, 3 years into my opiate addiction, and at this time, I have found what an Oxycontin is, and I am completely strung out on Oxycontin, and these pills are $80 a milligram. And I didn't make much money off coaching, and I was working at a gas station that didn't make much money, and all the money I had was going towards drugs. And I didn't grow up with a lot of money, and I lived with my mom still at 19, almost 20 years old. And it was a Friday night, and that Saturday was sectionals for wrestling at Oak Hill High School. So on a night where I should have been sitting in that room and maybe watching film and trying to help these kids, you see, my community entrusted me with the youth of our community. They entrusted me to teach these kids not only how to be a wrestler, but how to be an adult, how to put their life on track. You see, coaches for me meant the world to me because those coaches cared about me for more than just my last name. They seen something in me that I didn't see it myself, and I was asked to do that to others, and I failed my community miserably. And in 2007, I made a decision one night because I didn't know what a withdrawal really was, because I was able to be high every day. And I'm sitting in a room, my little room in my mom's apartment, and we didn't grow up with a ton, and I didn't have a door. I just had a sheet that I nailed up, and that was my door. And it was behind that blanket that my mental health kicked in, and the depression really arose, and the anxiety was there. And the first time I really understood what suicidal ideology was. And I'm sitting in that room, and I'm breaking out in a sweat, and then I'm freezing, and my back hurts, and I had restless legs, and my knees wouldn't quit shaking, and I had never felt misery like I felt that night. And I made a decision that night that was ultimately going to change everything for me. And I lived in a small town where everybody knows everybody. And there was a family a few houses down that would help clothe me, and they would feed me on the nights that I didn't have food. And they even took me on family vacations. And they kind of took me in like I was one of their own. And it was on this night in December of 2007, sitting in there experiencing withdrawals for the first time. I walked out of my house, and I walked a few houses down, and I went around back, and I put my foot through their back door. And I went through their cabinets and their medicine cabinet, and I flipped over mattresses. I went through everything I could, and I didn't know if I was looking for money, for drugs, for jewelry, if I needed a TV. I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew I'd never experienced pain like I felt that night. And the pain medication I was addicted to was very expensive at the time, and I didn't find much in there. And I left that house, and I went through the backyard, and I crossed the alley to the neighbor's house. And the first house I seen that didn't have any lights on, and I didn't see a car in the driveway. I went to that back door, and I put my foot through that back door. And I remember that when I kicked that door open, the door swung open, and it smacked the washer and dryer. I can hear that sound. But it was in that moment that out of the corner of my eye, I seen a little light on. And I was in a laundry room, and there was a kitchen. And through the kitchen was a living room. And what I didn't know when I kicked that door in was there was a mom in that living room with a small child. And that mom screamed a scream that 17 years, 18 years later, I can still hear some nights. And that scream pierced the innermost being of me, because she didn't know who I was, and she didn't know if I was there to hurt her, and she didn't know if I was there to hurt her baby. She just knew that something was going on in the back of her house. She called the cops. I took off running. I heard her dial 911. And I get to my house, and less than 10 minutes later, the cops got there. And I get arrested for the first time. And I'm 19 years old with the entire world in front of me. And because of one choice that I made on one night, I find myself incarcerated. And I sat in that county jail for 6 months. In my thought process, I kept telling myself that I'm a coach in this community, and I grew up in this community, and they know who I am, and they know I'm not a bad person, and they know I just made a mistake. But when I got in that courtroom that day for sentencing, they looked at it kind of the exact opposite. And they looked at it because I was a coach and because I grew up in this community and because I should have known better. And when I'm sitting in this courtroom and I hear the judge say, "Mr. Knuckles, the state of Indiana hereby sentences you to 14 years in the Indiana Department of Corrections." And I'm 19 years old. And I'd never been in trouble before. And I had a surgery, and I had no idea the love affair I was going to have with this pain pill. And just a few short years later, I have to accept the fact that I'm going to prison. And the thing I remember most about that day, and it wasn't so much the judge saying you're going to prison for 14 years, but I remember about that day is my mom was in the courtroom, and I remember hearing her scream and cry because I was an only child, and to her, even though I was 19, I was still her baby. And I remember when I stood up with the bailiff, and I had shackles around my ankles, and I had handcuffs on, and I had a chain around my waist, and they chained my handcuffs to the chain around my waist. And I remember my mom, as she was screaming and as she was crying, she just kept asking me, why? And I didn't have an answer. I didn't know what to tell her. I didn't have an answer of why I was addicted to opiates. I didn't have an answer of why I just committed that burglary. But it should have been in that moment that I should have caught the gravity of how addiction doesn't only affect me, but it wrecks entire families. In Indiana, you get a 50% rule. You do 50% of your time. In Grant County, they sentenced me to 14 years. They suspended 7, put it on probation. And I had to do 7 to 3.5 years in the Indiana Department of Corrections. I did that 3.5 years, and the entire time I was down, I got high almost every single day while I was in prison. If any of you don't know, if you can get a drug out here, whether it's heroin, methamphetamine, alcohol, tobacco, marijuana, it does not matter. If I can get it out here, I can also get it in there. And my mindset didn't change, and my thinking didn't change, and I had a hole inside of me that I did not know how to fill. No matter what I put there, no matter if it was drugs, if it was money, if it was women, if it was work, nothing could fill that gap. So I got out after doing my 3.5 years, and in recovery, a big thing that we say is you got to change your people, your places, and your things. And I didn't believe that in 2010. So what I did, because everything I did worked so well for me my whole life, I thought it would work well again, and I went right back to the same people in the same place, and we all did the same things. And it was a few short months later that I violated. And I violated because I met a girl in Bluffton, Indiana. And it's kind of a full circle thing here. And when I'm in Bluffton, Indiana, and my addiction is still rampant, this girl was a little more well off than I was, and she had credit cards. And as I told you, I was going to steal a couch if you walked out of the room. She left that credit card. I stole that credit card out of her wallet. And instead of buying drugs or something cool, I ran down to the gas station and I bought some gas station food and put some gas in my car. And it didn't matter what I used. The act of theft was enough to violate my probation and give me a felony. And I ended up spending 6 months in the Wells County Jail right here in this town. But because I committed a felony here and I got arrested here, the 7 years I had on probation in Grant County was violated. And they took me straight from here, and they took me back to Grant County, and the judge said, "Good to see you back. Do another 3.5." So now I'm 27 years old, if we're doing the math. I got arrested when I was 19. I got sentenced when I was 20. Now I'm 27 years old, and I've done over 7 years in the Indiana Department of Corrections. Addiction took away my entire 20s. My choice. But I'll never get those years back. I'll never be able to get back what I did to my friends and my family. Addiction took that from me, from my choice. When I got out that second time, should have only took 7 years and 2 times for me to get it. But as I mentioned a little earlier, there was a hole inside of me that I could not fill. No matter what I fed it, it would not close. So I committed another felony in Gas City, Indiana, and they sent me back to prison for the 3rd time. And by the grace of God, it was the final time. But it was during that 3rd sentence that stuff began to change for me a little bit. See, I'm in a day room 2 years after I've been locked up, and I'm using every day. And one of the things that happened in that day room, you see, when you go to Indiana Department of Corrections, you're no longer a person. Your name doesn't matter anymore. I was 188608. I didn't have a first name. They didn't call me Cody. They called me inmate number 188608. That's what the state of Indiana, when we make those decisions and those choices, that's what we are. We're no longer a person, we're a number. And I'm sitting in this day room at Westville Correctional Facility in northwestern Indiana. And there's a group of guys that are playing cards beside me. And they start to get loud and it starts to get heated. And one gentleman gets up and he walks past me. And his shoulder touches my shoulder as he walks past. And in prison, you mind your own business, and if it's not happening to you, you don't pay it any mind. And he went to his cell, and when he came back out, I didn't even pay attention, but he walked right by me, and what I didn't know is he had grabbed a knife that he had made, and the gentleman that disrespected him, he stabbed that man so many times that the man had no chance to live, and I watched this man lose his life within 6 feet of me. And I was at that moment, at that time, because of choices and decisions that I made. But it was at that moment that something shifted for me also, because I understood that if that can happen so easy to him, it could happen to me. And even though I had suicidal ideology a lot of times, and I had overdosed, it was at that moment that I realized I didn't want to die. So I went to my cell that night and I started to pray to a God that I didn't know if it existed. And I started to pray to a God that I didn't believe in. And I started to pray to a God that if he was out there, I need you. Because I had reached my rock bottom. And for 2 weeks I would pray this prayer: God, if you're real, I need you. Please help me. I cannot do this addiction thing on my own. And I didn't really know how to pray at the time. I would just repeat that, and I would go to sleep, and I would wake up the next morning, and I would go find Suboxone or whatever it was, and I'd get high again, and that was the cycle I was in. But a funny thing happens when you truly open up your heart to something greater than you. People ask me, how do you know God's real? Why are you so big in your faith? And I can look them in the eye and say, because when I called, he answered. Because when I called out to him with a pure heart, he answered. And it was on the morning of October 17th, October 24th, 2017, that I woke up like any other morning, and I prayed that night. And I picked up a daily bread. Anybody familiar with a daily bread? I picked up this daily bread. And I remember I read John, and not this one. And I read John, and I don't remember what it said, But I remember seeing in black letters, John. And when I came to, I'm bawling my eyes out, and I'm on a cold cement floor in Westville Correctional Facility, and for the first time in my life, I'm at the foot of the cross. I felt peace, and I felt love, and I felt joy, and I felt like there was something more to life than what I'd been living. And I stood up off that floor, and I wiped the tears off. And I went down a few cells. There was an older gentleman down there, and he was always reading the Bible, and I just looked at him like he was a joke for so long. And I said, hey, can I borrow that book? He said, I'm going to do you one better, son. You can have this book. And I took that book like it was the only possession I had in my life. And I went back to my cell, and I climbed up on that top bunk, and I opened this book, and I started at Genesis, and I went through Revelation, and I didn't know what I was reading, but I knew I felt calm in the midst of chaos. And for 2 weeks, I sat up on that top bunk, and I went through withdrawals, and I felt miserable, and I hated every ounce of what I was going through, but that book got me through everything I went through. And it was a short while later, I met a guy out of Anderson. His name was Joe Huff, and he had a ministry called Man to Man Ministries, and he had a class called A Purpose-Driven Life. And I didn't know who this man was, but he walked in, and there was 142 of us, and he came up to me and said, son, you're going to come with me. He didn't know me from Adam. I know now that God used him to draw me out there that day. And that man would speak life into me, and he would teach me how to read the Bible, and he would show me that there's more than it's just a book. And right before I got out, 2 days before I got out, I had a class with Joe, and Mr. Huff said, whether you see it or not, your story is going to help impact the masses. And in 2018, I'm looking at this man like he's crazy. No one wants to hear my story. No one's going to hear my story. Matter of fact, I don't ever want anybody to know that I was snotting at, and I think I found God. I'm not going to tell anybody that. But you see, he knew something that I didn't, and God had a plan. And in 2019, a pastor by the name of Gary Dalton is a probation officer in Grant County. And I walked into the probation department, and he said, I'll see you Sunday. And I said, see me where? He was like, at Bethel. And a funny thing happened that day. I went in that Sunday morning, and ultimately, not only did I meet my wife, who's a youth leader at our church, and now we have a little girl, but I also met this Yahoo the same day. And you see how good our God is and how great God works. He was in a season in his life where he wasn't working with anyone. He wasn't mentoring guys. He had kind of stepped back, and a mutual friend introduced us, and they said, my buddy said, hey, have you heard of John Humphreys? I'm like, no, that name sounds dumb. Who's this guy? He's like, man, I think you should meet him. Your stories are kind of similar. So he introduced me to this man named John. And as only God can do, we kind of clicked instantly. And he took me under his wing in the beginning. And from the day I met him until today, we've pretty much been inseparable. And we've had the honor and the privilege to travel around and be able to talk to people and speak life to people. And at Norwell High School this week, I went in thinking that it was my job to speak life to these students. And this little girl at Norwell High School came up to me, and she was crying with tears in her eyes, and she said, I love God so much. Can I pray for you guys? And as only God can do, he shows you that when you go in with an agenda and you think it's your choice to help someone else, this little girl just came in and wrecked our world. God used her to show us that it's not about us, it's about him. And that hole that I was talking about that I could not fill, that hole was filled in the blink of an eye by Jesus Christ. And when the Lord started working in me, and he started showing me that there was more to this recovery thing than just being sober. Recovery is a lifestyle. I take my recovery serious, and I'm so passionate about this topic because John and I have personally buried over 50 people in the last 3 years. Some people laugh at it, and some people say, why do you guys do what you do? Because who else is going to? Addiction is a real thing that's ravishing our communities. I can almost guarantee that everybody in here is not only knows somebody that's affected or probably knows somebody somewhat close to them that has overdosed and not here with us anymore. And the beautiful thing about an event like tonight is everybody comes together with the same agenda, and we all want to see the same thing. And like Mr. Gerber said, no more. But it's got to start somewhere, because for so long we're playing the defense and we're letting addiction come to us, and we're letting people die, and then they bring people in and speak at a funeral. But Wells County made a statement tonight, and they're going to be proactive. And it couldn't be more of an honor for John and I to get behind that and rally with this county and this community and you parents and you students. Because addiction doesn't discriminate. It doesn't matter who you are, the age you are, how big you are, how small you are. Every single one of us are one bad choice and one bad decision away from not only wrecking our lives, but we're those one decisions away from not being here anymore. It's been an honor. It's been a long 3 days. I can barely talk. But to Wells County one last time, you guys went above and beyond. And for a couple of guys an hour away that our heart is with the Lord and our heart and passion is in recovery, we thank you so much. I am Cody. We are Cody and John Speak. God bless you guys. Thank you.
I know what y'all are thinking. Where did John get that dope shirt that he's wearing? Right? I can feel it. It's over here at Thistle's Recovery. And I forgot, I'm scared to walk by this again because he really just left them. Sorry, guys. What else? So that's Thistle's Recovery. That's where I got this shirt, right? And then I got these bracelets that are really dope too. Actually, at the Thistles, they might have a couple pieces left of the saltwater watermelon candy, but I ate most of it. So I left a couple for you all. Place of Grace, I got the bracelets, right? Community of Care of Northern Indiana right there. So I want to tell you, like, I'm bringing these people up for a reason, but those people have prayed for us so much. We love them. Stop by that booth and just talk to them. They've been praying for us for a long time. Amazing people. A Better Life Beyond His Hope is a good meeting. That's one of the first places that let me speak over in Red Key. So the reason you're dealing with me right now has some to do with them. So either thank them or smack them, however you want to handle that. Is Sam here? And so Sam is with Bare Knuckle Recovery, and that's an amazing resource on your Facebook. Look it up. Fort Wayne Recovery in Allendale. And stand up for a second, Sam. So, he's an amazing resource for a lot of different stuff. So, just keep that in mind. So, and then I want to talk about something about Cody, because he likes to come up here and joke. So before I get started, who steals a credit card for gas station food? I feel like they should have never let him out of prison for that one. If I was the judge, I was like, just on principle alone, you're gone. And you'll be happy to know he still spends a big part of his budget, it's legal now, on gas station food. You can call him randomly through the day and he's probably at a gas station if he's not working. So my name is John Humphreys, and I was in active addiction for 17 years. I liked everything. Some people want to get into what is the source of, what starts you down this path. Is it trauma? Is it social pressure? For me, I just was trying to find an identity and a place where I fit in. And when I started to get high, I just enjoyed it until I didn't enjoy it anymore. And I think a lot of times people are like, why can't they just get sober? Like this is an easy thing. For me, I wasn't running around. I mean, I was chasing a high, but I was never getting it. I was running from getting sick, dope sick. And a lot of you will be like, it can't be that bad, and then you have the flu and you post on Facebook, pray for me, I have the flu. Don't you ever talk about withdrawals if you're needing social media prayer for the flu, because they're not comparable. All my people in recovery, are you with me on that? It's not the same thing. So I hope by the end of this, when you look at somebody that's struggling, you may think of me because that is me. Those are my people. That is my past. That is where I come from. That's what I'm birthed from. 17 years of addiction. I had a couple daughters born while I was in addiction. And they're awesome. And after time, I had to make some decisions. I got so tired of myself and the life that I had chosen and the relationships that I was in. I was exhausted. I don't want to say I wanted to die or anything like that, but I do remember having a fentanyl patch on, drinking some methadone. I was on the liquid stuff. We're not going to get into all that tonight. That'd be a whole study if you're not familiar with. But I was on liquid methadone from the clinic. And I was wearing fentanyl patches, which is more like a morphine patch and not like the fentanyl it's the same fentanyl, but it's not the powdered fentanyl that they're lacing everything with. But I was intentionally wearing these patches. And I was nodding out one time and my kids were running around playing and I literally thought I was fading a little bit. Some of you that are, in recovery or have felt addiction, you know that feeling of this is different. But I was talking to myself and I was like, I don't care. Life or death, what does it matter? I'm so miserable and I can, you hear the kids playing, but it's they'd be better off if I wasn't here. I'm serving no purpose. That's how broken I was. And I believed this lie of everybody'd be better off if I was just gone. And I faded. I woke back up. Nothing changed. Right? And I told you, I had daughters. I had my oldest daughter. It was one of the most amazing days of my life, but I was high. And I was thinking about getting high the next day. And you would think that would make me get better. Right? But what it did is I had convinced myself that I had to be really high to be a good parent. So I became even more of an addict, if that's a thing. I felt absolutely no hope. And for some of us, we have a hard time. It's oh, why don't they just change? I changed, but it took some time. And I want you to look at that when you're driving around and you see somebody who's struggling. You have to have your boundaries and things like that. But I want you to see that person as me because we're the same. And I want you to see that person as Cody if they're big, tall, and goofy because we're the same. I had gotten so tired of myself and this relationship that I was in was horrible. And I had to get out. And I had people trying to give me advice, but I didn't know what to do. I was so broken inside. I had no hope. I didn't want to leave my daughters, but for me to find any kind of freedom from addiction, I had to. All right, so those of us in recovery, well, that's not that bad if you don't understand my lifestyle. I was on the run, kind of. We were on HUD housing. I didn't exist. I wasn't paying I wasn't paying support. I was hiding, right, for the free housing that she was getting. We were on SNAP and everything else, so I had to be invisible. So for me to leave, I didn't know when I was going to see my daughters again. So when you tell somebody, just get sober, sometimes you're asking them to sacrifice a lot more than what it sounds like. For me to get sober, I had to walk away from my daughters. The only reason I had to live. I had to walk away from my daughters not knowing when I was going to see them again. But things were going on in my spirit, and I felt like I had to go find freedom from this addiction, because maybe they deserved at least one parent that wasn't struggling. And they were so little. Some of you have seen them on like social media and stuff, but they were so little. And it was like the breaking point had came, and I was out. You know, and Cody got into a lot of the spiritual stuff, but I was reading some scripture, and I was starting to find peace in this Bible. I was a thief, so I was going to this church, and they had like this Bible rack. It was a hippie church. That's the only way they got me to go. You know, when you're high on methadone, no offense, but you may not want to go to like where they're dressed up for church. You kind of just want to slide in the back, have some coffee, and get out. But my brother was living in Anderson at the time, and I was there too, and it's his wife now, but it was his girlfriend at the time. He was like, hey, you should come to this church. It's a hippie church. I was like, say less. I'm in. I didn't believe in any of that stuff, nothing like that. It was just like, it sounded cool. He was like, they have a coffee bar. I was like, great, that'll help my methadone kick in. And they had this Bible rack, and I was a thief. I don't know if you can actually steal a Bible. I've thought about this, because it's like if somebody came into my house, I have a Bible, I have a few that I love, and it's like if somebody stole that, how would I feel about it? Because I would feel convicted about being mad, but I would want my Bible back. So like I would have to post something like, hey, I'll give you money to get my Bible back, whoever stole it, please, but if you need it, keep it. So I'm in church, and it's in an old school building, and they do the worship, and I think the song was like, oh, he makes beautiful things. He makes beautiful things out of us. He makes beautiful things out of dust. And I liked it there, because nobody was paying attention to me. And every week I would take a Bible. And I would go home with the Bible, and I couldn't read it. I didn't understand. I couldn't explain it. So you could have sent me home with the Lord of the Rings or the King James Version. I wouldn't have known what was real or what you people were talking about. And so I'm taking a Bible every week, stealing, borrowing, but I can't read any of them. Then one week, I walk in, and I look at the rack, and there's a big blue Bible, bigger than any Bible I had, and I didn't have a blue one. So the whole service, I'm distracted, like I'm going to get that bad boy right there. I ain't singing to Jesus or nothing. I'm going to get that Bible, and we're getting out of here. And I got it. And I would have taken it by force. And I get home and I start reading this thing, and here's what happened. Like, this is the craziest thing. I open it, and it's a study Bible. And I get into Matthew, and I can understand it. And all of the chaos around me, when I would read these stories, like, everything started to calm down. I didn't believe in any of it. At first, I thought I was just a really good reader. It had been since like the 8th grade since I read anything. I think Sounder was the last thing I read, and I didn't even finish it. I lied on my book report. I read the back of the book. So all this stuff is going on inside of me, and it's time for me to go. But for me to get away, I have to leave my daughter. It's the most important thing in the world to me, but that's the only way I can find freedom. So, again, I have my aunt come get me. My aunt just passed away recently. She was like my saving grace. And it's been like a hard process of like, she was just there all the time for me and the girls. But she comes and picks me up, and I have to say goodbye to my girls. And I'm completely broken. Completely broken. And I tell them goodbye, and I'm watching them in the rear view as they get smaller and smaller, and I'm completely crushed. Sometimes for us to find sobriety, it's not as simple as like, go to treatment and rehab, go to a transitional house. You know what I mean? The steps are different for everybody. I'm going to fast forward this part so I can tell you a little bit about fentanyl itself, but basically what happened was, I was so broken that I had to put my issue at the feet of something. I couldn't carry it anymore. Everybody's path to recovery is different. And I'm not here to judge. Well, I know that there's a lot of ways to get there. But my way was laying at the feet of the cross because I couldn't carry it anymore. Never been so broken. Never been so broke. Never been so hopeless. No, never been so sad. And I did that. Listen, guys. That was 11 and a half years ago. And I never picked anything else back up. But since then, I've become like a recovery coach, peer support specialist, and I've started working with people. And I have watched as fentanyl in the last 11 years has changed the whole dynamic of addiction in this community. And I want to tell you some stuff for the parents that came in or the grandparents that came in, and you want to know more about this, I applaud you, because we've gotten to the place where we can't hide from this anymore. And the fact that we've been treated so well this week here, we have been treated amazing. And we're so grateful for that, because a lot of communities don't want to admit that it's there, but it's there. And we had one that was kind of local, and 2 kids in high school, early, freshman, sophomore, overdosed, smoking weed that was laced with fentanyl. 1 died. Our youth. So we can't let pride get in the way of saving our youth. Right? We can't say we don't have a problem here if it's going to. They asked us outside, they said, what is your mission here this week? In all of these schools, I don't know how many we spoke at, 9, and tonight, and the mission stayed the same. If we can spare one family from having to feel what we felt when we buried somebody we loved, this whole thing was worth it. My whole life was worth it to spend it doing this. If one family can avoid that pain. I have answered calls at the emergency room where a 17-year-old had to get Narcan 4 times, maybe more, off of what he thought was a half of his Xanax. The kid was working hard. He was taking care of a kid, and every once in a while he'd take a half of Xanax to relax. And he's stressed. He took a half of Xanax, and I'm in there talking to him. I'm like, what are you doing? And he was like, I take a half of Xanax to relax. They ran his report and checked his stuff. It was all fentanyl. He almost died, thinking he was taking his Xanax. We can't wait until our kids get into college to try to talk to them about this stuff. We can die. They're finding it in vapes. It's everywhere. If they're selling it in blunts, I started smoking weed when I was young. I wouldn't be here if I was raised in this world, because I tried everything. It's our responsibility. You know what I mean? Our kids suffer enough in this country. They're not looked out for enough. And for us to let pride or something like that stop us from having these conversations is heartbreaking, because we felt it. I want to tell you all a story. Man, I have time. This is the pain, and some of you have felt it. But we speak at recovery groups and all kinds of different things, and I was in Hartford City in a church basement several years ago. And we gave this message, and this mother came up to us, and she said, I need you to come talk to my son. He needs help. Will you come talk to him? And I was like, yeah. And I went over, and I met this kid who was 14 years old, and he's crying. And he's like, this is so hard. Life is so hard. This was before the pandemic. Our kids are going through so much. You know what I mean? They're going through so much. And he looked at it. This was years ago. He was like, it's so hard. Trying to get sober so hard. He had been using since he was 9 years old. Shooting up. His dad died when he was a kid. And everybody around him was just a mess. And I started to talk to him. I was like, it's not that hard, started to speak life into him. And we started working with him, and he was doing great. He caught on fire. It was too much. We'd go to the gas station, and he'd start telling people about sobriety and Jesus. Like, you gotta chill. I've got places to go. Like, it's okay to like pray for him, but you don't have to tell him the whole book of Luke, you know? If we went to a service and there was you didn't even want to do an altar call, because you'd literally like, bro, you went Genesis to Revelations. They checked out 2 hours ago. But he was on fire, and he's actually a really good speaker. He's a better speaker than me, better speaker than Cody. Like, he was just a natural at it as a teenager. And we started to spend more time with him, and he became like a little brother to me. He became almost like a son. Me and my friend Brian, like, we adopted this dude. He had all of the resources, experts around him in recovery. And he ended up slipping up. At about the age of 18, he relapsed. And he overdosed. And we're talking while he's in the hospital, and he felt so much guilt and shame. He felt embarrassed. You know? We got to do better at loving people through messes. You know what I mean? Instead of like judging them into holes and dark places, like, we have to just love them out of that. You know what I mean? Nobody should feel like I messed up once and now I'm going to go hide. But he was telling me, he was like, I'm so embarrassed and ashamed and guilty, like, I feel stupid. So then we're working with him again. I'm ready to fight him at this point. And when I say fight, like, I'm talking street. Like, you know what I mean? I'm ready to bust his head open. Then he overdoses again, and he overdoses again, and he overdoses again, and he overdoses again, and I'm in a violent state of mind. So he's at the trap house. Some of you know what the trap house is, my people. Some of you may not know what the trap house is. It's like the crack house. I don't know what we called it in the 80s, but, you know, it was where the dope's at. And I call him, and I'm like, hey, you're coming to stay with me, I'm coming to get you. He said, they don't want you here. I said, no, they really don't. I'm on my way. They were the nicest freaking people. I was waiting for them to make me a sandwich. I walked in. Oh, yeah, he's here. We're glad you're here. I bet you are. So I took him with me. And he's staying on my couch, and he's still using. And like, my daughters know him. And everybody's like, how are you going to have him in your house? Are you freaking kidding me? He's my people. How are you going to have him in your house? Are you scared? No. He was like family. And I'm looking at him one night, and I'm kind of talking, prayer type stuff, like, you know, I've been called to help these people, and I've watched people get freed. Why can't I get just one favor and get him out of this? Why? And he's out there nodding out, and I'm like, what is wrong with you? And he was like, nobody cares. Unless I'm doing good, none of these people care. I'm embarrassed, I'm ashamed, I feel guilt. Nobody cares. Some of our youth have made mistakes, and that's how they feel. We gotta love them through it. It's not just the addiction part, it's not just the drugs part, like, we have to be a safe place for them. All of us want grace, like, we need to hand it out too. I want my kids to know that they can come to me with anything, and they can land here, and they're gonna be safe, and we're gonna get through it. Nobody cares unless I'm doing good. And there was nothing I could do. Hand it over to God. He stayed with us a couple months. He started to do a little bit better. He left. This kid just wanted family. Even when he was high, he was like, let's have a movie night. He came to my daughter's indoor soccer. If you've never been to indoor soccer, you gotta go. It's like soccer hockey. Real quick, my daughter's a beast. But she's really calm, and she's out there getting bullied constantly. And we're like, girl, you got to defend yourself. Because everybody's 3 times your size. And I was like, what I need you to do is be aggressive. She's like, I don't want to get in trouble. I don't care if you get in trouble. This ends tonight. I yell out, massive. This was creepy. She's standing there, looks up, smiles, nods her head, starts laying people out. She turned into the Dennis Rodman of indoor soccer. The next game, 14 whistles. And our team loves it because it's like she's not getting bullied anymore. They stopped kicking her direction. These big kids were like she's not right. All he wanted was family. He loved doing that stuff even when he was high. So he gives me a call one day, and he had got this apartment, and he's showing me all of this stuff because they get excited about these little things. Like, he's showing me the bath mats. He got an apartment. I don't care about your bath mats. They're great. Great. Did you see my curtains? I felt bad. I should have been more excited. But it was stupid. But I should have been excited, you know. So then he does this post, and he had met a girl in jail. Now, my people over here probably know how this happens. But for the rest of us, how do you meet a girl in jail, you ask? Well, you talk to them through the toilet. Nicholas Sparks needs to write that one, doesn't he? It all started with a toilet and a beautiful echoing voice. So they met talking through the toilet at the jail. They flush it, they talk to her. And I told him, I was like, dude, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. Well, at first, I'm kind of a smart mouth. I was like, dude, I'm in tears. I'm feeling Titanic vibes right now after this story. So he does a post on Facebook, and he's like, hey, everybody, today is the best day of my life. I just found out that my girlfriend's pregnant. I'm finally going to have the family that I've always wanted. This is the best day of my life. I'm going to propose to her. We're going to get married. I'm going to have my family. Everything that he wanted had happened. Like that, you know. And everybody's celebrating. I call him, congratulations, everything. And then a couple days later, his uncle and him used to have lunch, and his uncle would stop by and check on him. His uncle goes over there, knocks a few times, nobody answers. So he lets himself in. Well, my friend's fiance, I guess, obviously she was pregnant because he had said that, but she had a toddler or two, and the toddler's running around. And he's walking through the house, but he can't find him. And he goes back to the bathroom, and they're both laying on the ground, dead, with needles hanging out of their arms. In such bad shape, this is somebody I love, in such bad shape that he didn't even try to resuscitate him. And this was a young man with so much purpose. And he said nobody cared. And when they ran tests on everything, and the heroin was laced with fentanyl, and I asked myself, why did he decide to use one more time? Maybe he was celebrating. Like, I'll never know, but he said nobody cared. And I just kept thinking, like, I had to tell my daughters. And he said nobody cared, and like I'm talking to them about it, and everybody's crushed. And I want y'all to hear this because this is the impact. This is why we do the things that we do. This is why I've given so much of my life to like talk to people in the middle of the night when everybody else is sleeping and I'm tired. Like, this is why we do this. Because this feeling, I don't want you to have to feel it. And I'm writing this eulogy, and like, I just keep thinking, like, he said nobody cared. And I'm like, I can't even, the paper keeps getting ruined because my tears are just dropping on this thing, and I'm mad, and I'm sad, and I can't understand it. And he said nobody cared, and we had this funeral during the pandemic, and we were only supposed to have so many people, like almost 300 people showed up, walking by his casket crying. He had impacted that many lives in a short period of time. He had such a purpose and a calling on his life, and fentanyl took him out, and took her out, and took a whole family out. Today, like, they should have a kid in a big wheel and like be doing all of these things. And it's just a memory. He's just a memory that I have when I'm sitting on my porch sometimes, and I can't control when it comes and goes, and I just cry. Because he took something that was laced with fentanyl and it took the whole family out. And I just kept thinking, he said nobody cares, and I'm watching all these lives that he impacted, walking by this casket, crying. And I've got news for you. There's youth in this community that feel like nobody cares. And if we don't step up and let them know they're loved, then somebody on the streets is going to. Does it have to be your child to love them? In your youth groups, on your playgrounds, in your schools? We've talked to them all week. They're surrounded by this. You've got to have these conversations with them. They've got to feel loved. They have to understand that they have a purpose. This is on us. We can't wait for the government or the police or all, it's on us. It's our responsibility. I have to go harder, and I have to love harder. And I've got to go to places where y'all don't want to go. And some of y'all are going to have to go to places where you don't want to go. And you're going to have to love in uncomfortable places. I think we're doing I'm getting hot. I think we're going to do a Q&A so we can answer some of that stuff. But what I do want to challenge you all. First off, you should be so grateful that you have community leaders that put this together, because we can't get this stuff done in a lot of places. So give them a round of applause. And for you all to have students in the school system, Southern Wells, Norwell, Bluffton, we have met them this week, and they are some amazing students. We've been prayed for, they listen, they've shared stories. Like, you have so many amazing young people in this community. You all are doing great with them. I just challenge you to love a little harder. And I just challenge you to bring the awareness. Have the hard conversations. Talk to the youth and have those conversations. Daily, people will talk to you about enabling, and it's an interesting thing, because the people that talk about enabling haven't ever dealt with recovery. A lot of them haven't dealt with recovery stuff. So it's okay to have coffee with them. It's okay to have lunch with them. It's okay to have phone calls with them. I don't care how bad they're doing. Don't give them money, but if you can, daily, even if it's just a text message, hey, how's it going? Just to keep up on them. And if it's not realistic, just as much as you can. But one thing is have the conversation anyway. So talk to them about because when I talk about it's in vapes and weeds and it's in all of this stuff, and it can kill them. You know what I mean? It only takes about if you sharpen a pencil, you can put enough fentanyl at the end of that pencil to kill me. I'm a big dude. You know what I mean? So it takes very little for them. But just pay attention. That's the thing. That's the importance of the things that we have lost, is having dinner with your kids sometimes and just asking them about their day. Because if you're in tune with them like that, you'll notice when the little things are off. You know what I mean? The little things are the big things in this parental game. So it's if I have conversations with them on a regular basis with my girls, I can tell if something's off. And then we can kind of talk about it, and leave that communication open. And if they're honest with you about something, don't try not to snap, process, you know what I mean? That would be my suggestion with that, is just spend the time with them. Don't walk away from some of that traditional stuff that's made us connected. And if you're eating with them, or you have, having rides to practices and stuff, those are opportunities to kind of don't listen to music, have a conversation, and you'll be able to pick up on that stuff if you guys are communicating on a regular basis and, having those conversations.
One thing that you're blessed with here in Bluffton, and there's a lot of us in Grant County as well, is when it comes to recovery and it comes to mentors and sponsors and things like that, it's a fancy term, and a lot of people want to say I'm a mentor, I'm a sponsor. But something John taught me in the very beginning, it's okay to say you're a mentor or a sponsor and it looks good on the outside, but if you're not ready to do life with someone every single day, then it's nothing more than a title. Because it's easy for me to pick you up on Sunday morning and take you to church. What happens on Tuesday night when you're struggling? You see, where you're blessed is you're in a community with leaders in this community that I personally have had the honor to know and know the people they are. And when you're struggling on a Tuesday night, you're in a community where those people are going to pick up that phone and they're going to come get you and they're going to talk to you. Being a mentor and being a leader is a lot more than just a title. You couldn't be in a better spot, man. Proud of you.
I believe that's what started here tonight, if I'm not mistaken.
Is that what we're doing here tonight?
Yeah, and with the prevention thing, I think the amazing thing here is with the community leaders and the people that we've made contact. That's what they brought us here for.
Fantastic.
So we've been in fifth grade, sixth grade, seventh grade, eighth grade, high schools. And I mean, that's not going to answer everything. But that's the desire they have, and I think when you put these task force together, we have some in my community, it starts to give everybody resources to start to do the stuff. I mean, there's a lot of holes in the boat. I'm not talking about Bluffton, I'm talking about the country. You've got active addiction, you've got recovery, you've got prevention, you've got all of those things. And I think sometimes if we see a need, we got to step into that need, right? So if I'm looking and I'm like, man, my neighborhood needs cleaned up. You know, sometimes it's called, I'm the one that needs to go clean it up. So everybody needs to pray and figure out where their heart is. But I think that this, like what they've done here tonight is the beginning of that. There's a lot of like community leaders and resources and things here. And so I'm honestly proud and honored to be a part of it because like a lot of communities won't do this. They'll wait till there's a problem and they'll try to slap a Band-Aid on it. You know what I mean? And they'll bring in somebody with a bunch of bullet points and props and stuff, you know what I mean? And do you guys have a plug? All right, I said plug. Does Bluffton have a plug on Narcan?
We actually, I think there's behind the thrift store, the thrift shop, there's a dispenser. Right, and then of course our fire department carries it as well. So it is free, and it's in a discreet place. So yeah, that's a thing.
That's a good question. You need to write that down because you never know when you're going to need it.
Also, the health department can get it for them too. Yeah.
We have it at the high school as well.
Okay. Thanks, Steve. All the schools have it. Yeah.
That is awesome. So awesome. And even if you don't think you need it, you should keep it on you. 2 or 3.
So naloxone Narcan is now over the counter. And just a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, we did have the over the counter version on the shelf for purchase at CVS. There's also a standing order in the state of Indiana where we can dispense the prescription Narcan to you. And so if you'd like to do that and even attempt to bill your insurance, we can do that at a pharmacy. And many plans will pay for that 100%. If you're getting a prescription, say you're having, knee replacement surgery and you're going to have a high dose opioid for a little while, you can also ask for to be dispensed Narcan at the same time.
So I think John kind of touched on it a little bit. It's getting to know the kids. It's talking to them. The thing about addiction is if you're around someone for a short period of time or even long enough, they're going to start wearing that addiction. In a sense, their mannerisms are going to change. Their weight's going to fluctuate. There's a lot of outward signs when we're dealing with addiction. But I think, first of all, I want to say thank you because what it's going to take, and I think what this entire assembly was about tonight, is to spread awareness and to really be on the offense of addiction. And it's going to take not just you, but it's going to take an entire community of yous to ask that question, what can I do? And I think it's as simple as be present, listen, help when you can. You're not always, especially if you haven't been around it, you're not always going to know right off the bat, but just fill the gap. And if it is brought to you anyway, like he said, the first thing that a lot of us do is we want to get angry, we want to get mad because we don't understand. And it's easy to get mad at stuff we don't understand. But for anybody in here that's not familiar with addiction, John couldn't have said it any better. What we got to start doing is we got to start loving these kids with every ounce of us. Because when I thought about ending my own life, it was from guilt and shame and just being embarrassed of my entire reality. But if we can get these youth and these young people to understand that it's okay that you made a mistake, and if we fall down 7 times, you're going to be the person that picks them back up the 8th time. So I want to say again, thank you, because it takes courage to want to stand up and do and fight for something like this. And it's because of people like you that ultimately you have people like us in this entire section over here. So stand in the gap.
We're saying that with pride. You know that you're our people. We love you. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah. They'll tell you what a trap house is. But also, if you do feel the desire to help, if you look around at a lot of these ministries and places that offer things, you can get plugged in with them, and even if you're like, hey, I have a couple hours, a couple times a month, I have a couple hours. Is there anything I can do? And there's all kinds of things going on over here to where they'll be like, yeah, and plug you into something that they can help you, or just having coffee with them and getting a better idea of what some of the needs are. But that's another thing you can do. It doesn't take a 40-hour week. Sometimes it's like, hey, I've got an hour and I've got some free hands. Is there anything I can do to help you out?
If a kid's looking for it, a kid's going to find it. It's everywhere. The simple answer to that is everywhere.
There have been some principals that have found traces of it on base and everything. You don't have to be looking too for it to find it, honestly. It's there. In Grant County, they keep busting people with the M30s, like thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of dollars worth, and every one of those pills could kill a kid. Every one. And they're stopping some from getting in our community, but it was like me and Cody were talking, like they're selling them things cheap too. You know what I mean? We used to have to spend some money to get that. They're literally, you can give them money to go to movies, and they'll have enough money for a couple. So it's here. That's Grant County. That's not that far. So I think sometimes that we want a blanket answer to a problem. There's a lot of things that, like the personality, the environment they're in, like why they're making those decisions. That's something really, I think, like if I was in that position, I would kind of reach out to somebody that knows, that I could have the conversation on a deeper level, because it's sometimes that's the problem. Sometimes we make in this field is like, well, you got to do this, this, and this. I don't know the person, you know what I mean? And in that, like that person has unique qualities, gifts, hang-ups, problems, traumas, the way they respond to trauma. So it's kind of difficult it gets tougher as they get older. You know what I mean? And I believe it should all probably kind of start with prayer, but like reaching out to local people and be like, hey, what do you think about this situation? If you have recovery coaches or, friends that that are therapists or, people that are in alignment with really solid discernment. But it's really hard because I get those messages a lot, like, hey, I need you to help my son. And it's like, I've never saved anybody. You know what I mean? I'm kind of a mouthpiece, but I think sometimes, I know how tough it is to want that answer. You know what I mean? 'Cause I can hear it in the voices of the parents. But it's also such a unique thing, okay, let's navigate. Where are they at? What are they on? How bad is it? Is it daily? Is it benders? Like, there's just a lot of things. So I would encourage you, if you're from Bluffton, there's a lot of people around here. If you're from Bluffton in recovery, a recovery coach or anything like that, can you raise your hand? Are you local? You're trying to get the certification?
Yes.
Sweet, do it.
I'm almost done.
Sweet. Recovery coach?
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about. That's another thing, people, is start to pour into your people in recovery. Those things that not everybody gets scholarships and they're expensive. You want everybody walking around with them certifications. You hear me? Oh, see, when you start talking about donating, everybody stiffens up a little bit. I'm not asking for your money. I'm saying if you have somebody in recovery, start to pour into them. What's $500, $600, $700? You can have another person that's certified on these streets. That's not that much. You know, that's another way to help. Everybody wants soldiers, but for you to have soldiers on the front line, we'd have to have swords and we'd have to have shields. We have to have the things. So that's another thing to look at. How can I equip the people that are coming out? Because nobody can reach us like us. And we'll all attest to that. Nobody can reach us like us. That's another thing the community could do is who has enough time, and there's a lot of places, there's a lot of people want certifications, but they got to take a week off of work and they got to pay $700 or $800. That's a lot, But I would want them things fall. I would want recovery coaches falling out of the trees in my community. You know what I mean? We have them in my community. So that's another thing you can do. I don't know, start a thing. Sponsor a coach. Sponsor a recovery coach. There you go. We got enough churches and we got enough people that care to get a few people, right? Certifications. And buy them lunch while they're in there too. It's stressful.
Let's give these two gentlemen, Cody and John, another round of applause. We want to thank you guys for bringing your message to Wells County. For those that don't know me, I'm Sam Hafley. I currently serve on the Wells County Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors and at the Board of Directors at Family Centered Services. And I'm currently a member of the newly formed Drug Task Force here. And tonight, most importantly, I'm the closer. Okay? So we'll be getting you out of here soon. I won't take much more of your time, but I would like to take a moment to thank again the Wells County Foundation, the City of Bluffton, the Town of Ossian, the Town of Pinedo, the Wells County Commissioners, National Oil and Gas, and Renovate Counseling for sponsoring the event here tonight. I would also like to thank our three school districts, Southern Wells, Bluffton, and Norwell, for allowing Cody and John to bring their message to their students. As fellow Drug Task member and current Bluffton High School principal, Steve Baker said in one of our meetings, you can say that Bluffton, you can say that Southern Wells, you can say that Norwell has a drug problem. The bottom line is Wells County has a drug problem. Pointing the fingers is not going to get it done. What's going to get it done is what we're trying to do with the Drug Task Force is it's bringing government officials, business leaders, the schools, parents, non-for-profit organizations, and law enforcement together. That's how we're going to combat this problem and face it head on. Like Chandler said in the beginning, we want to be on the offense, not on the defense. I'd also like to recognize the organizations that have booths set up here. We invite you to visit them. We thank them. They're here just out of the generosity of coming. They have tons of information that they would love to share with you. I encourage you to stick around afterwards and visit them. They include Community Care, Park Center, Alive and Well, Bluffton Regional, AA, Bowen Center, Thistles Recovery, Adams Wells Crisis Center, Helping Hands, CADA, Renovate Counseling, Family Centered Services, Brianna's Hope, My Place of Grace, Hightown Recovery, and Cody and John. A reminder to everybody here tonight that when you came, you were entered into a drawing to win prizes such as the $25 gas cards, street fair ride bracelets, and gift baskets. The winning tickets have been drawn, okay, and they're listed on the whiteboard in the back of the room. So please find your number and collect your prize if you are the winner, okay? And you can see Holly's got her hand up back there. Those are where the whiteboards are, and back of each of those tables. So check your cards, collect your prizes. And finally, I'd like to thank John and Cody once again for bringing their message here to Wells County. I can't thank them. We, the Drugs Task Force, cannot thank them enough for what they've done for our community here this week. I would also like to thank the members of the Drug Task Force Committee, especially those who helped plan this event here tonight. I think somebody asked, what are we doing? This is just the start. The Drug Task Force Committee, you have seen it tonight with the sponsors, the county commissioners, the towns. They are getting behind this. That's why we think that this is, that we finally got where we feel we have government officials, the business community, parents, the schools, all on one team. So thank them again. Thanks for coming here tonight, and have a safe trip home.